The irony of sipping coffee on the veranda of my husband's dream house without him wasn't lost on me. Morning mist clung to the rolling hills beyond the property line, softening the edges of a view that Daniel had once described as worth every penny we don't have. It had been exactly 43 days since I'd last seen him. 43 days since he'd kissed my forehead in our Florence hotel room and said he was going out for fresh cannoli. 43 days since he'd walked out with his wallet, passport, and phone, leaving behind his wedding ring on the bathroom counter like a piece of forgotten jewelry. The Italian police had been sympathetic, but ultimately unhelpful. "Signora Mitchell, your husband's credit cards show activity in Munich, then Prague. This is not a missing person case, but a personal matter." Personal matter. Such a sterile phrase for having your life implode while on your 10th anniversary. Trip. I clutched my mug tighter as a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the morning air. The house around me, this sprawling countryside estate with its exposed beams and floor-to-ceiling windows, had been Daniel's obsession for years. He'd found the listing 3 years ago, when it was nothing but an abandoned property with potential. "This is it, Nora," he'd said, his eyes alight with that familiar enthusiasm that had first drawn me to him in graduate school. "Our forever home." I'd been skeptical. The asking price was well beyond our means. A university professor and a freelance translator didn't exactly qualify for mansions in the countryside. But Daniel had been relentless, picking up consulting jobs and investing aggressively in a market that happened to reward his risks. By some miracle, we'd closed on the property 2 months before our anniversary trip. Renovations had barely begun when we left for Italy, the house more construction zone than home. I'd returned alone to find contractors still working, confused by my solo appearance but continuing as planned on Daniel's explicit instructions. That, as it turned out, included full payment up front. My phone buzzed against the wrought iron table. My sister Maggie for the 3rd time this morning. "You can't keep avoiding me," she said when I finally answered. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm avoiding everyone." "Same difference. Mom's worried sick." I sighed, watching a pair of finches dart between the oak trees at the edge of the property. "I'm fine. You're hiding in a half-renovated house in the middle of nowhere while your husband is God knows where doing God knows what. That's the literal opposite of fine." She wasn't wrong. After filing the police reports and enduring pitying looks from hotel staff as I checked out alone, I'd returned to find our apartment sublease still in effect. With nowhere else to go, I'd come to the house, Daniel's house, because at least it had a roof and running water. "The contractors finished the main floor and master suite last week," I said, avoiding her actual point. "It's livable now." "That's not..." Maggie paused, and I could picture her counting to 10 as her therapist had suggested for dealing with difficult siblings, namely, me. "Have you checked the accounts again?" Another topic I'd been avoiding. "Not since last week." "Nora." "Fine." "Hold on." I pulled up our joint account on my phone, the one we'd used primarily for household expenses. The balance remained unchanged from my last check, just enough to cover utilities and property taxes for maybe 6 months. Our savings account, the buy, one that had held our safety net plus renovation funds, remained drained. "Nothing new." "And the credit cards? Canceled like you told me to." It had been Maggie who'd insisted I report the cards stolen after discovering Daniel had maxed them out before disappearing. The bank had been understanding, removing the charges given the circumstances, but the humiliation lingered. Good. "And, you've spoken to a lawyer?" I stood abruptly, unable to remain still. "Not yet. Nora, I know. I need to file for divorce, protect myself legally, blah blah blah. But doing that means..." My voice caught treacherously. "It means admitting this is real." Maggie's tone softened. "Sweetie, he cleared out your accounts, maxed out your credit cards, and vanished during your anniversary trip. This is already real." I leaned against the veranda railing, looking out at the property that was simultaneously mine and not mine at all. The orchard Daniel had insisted on planting was just beginning to bud. Would I still be here when those trees bore fruit? I found something, I said, the words escaping before I could reconsider. In the house. What kind of something? Maggie's lawyer senses were clearly tingling. I hesitated. I hadn't planned to tell anyone, not until I understood what it meant. A safe, built into the wall of the home office, behind where a bookshelf is supposed to go. The contractors didn't know anything about it, said it wasn't in the plans. Did you open it? No, I don't have the combination. Have you tried your anniversary? His birthday? Your birthday? I smiled despite everything. Yes, Maggie. I've tried all the obvious combinations. It's not exactly a master lock. It's a serious safe, the kind you'd keep valuables in. Or secrets, Maggie said, voicing the thought I'd been avoiding. After hanging up, I wandered through the house that was supposed to be our dream home. The soaring ceilings and open floor plan that had once represented our future now felt like monuments to deception. How could Daniel have planned this house so meticulously, down to the specific placement of windows to capture the sunrise, while also planning to abandon it? To abandon me? None of it made sense. In the kitchen, with its half-installed marble countertops and top-of-the-line appliances, I found myself staring at the refrigerator where I'd magnetized the only photo I had from our trip. Daniel and me, standing before the Duomo, his arm around my waist and his smile reaching his eyes. Taken just 2 days before he vanished, I snatched the photo down, ready to rip it to shreds, when something in the background caught my eye. A man in a dark suit, partially obscured by other tourists, looking directly at us. His face wasn't clearly visible, but something about his posture, rigid, attentive, seemed out of place among the relaxed tourists. Probably nothing. Just a business person annoyed at camera-happy tourists blocking his way. But I found myself, returning the photo to the refrigerator, a small chill running down my spine. The doorbell rang, startling me so badly I knocked over a mug in the sink, sending it crashing to the tile floor. We didn't get unexpected visitors out here. The property was set too far back from the main road, with an electronic gate that required a code that only Daniel, the contractors, and I knew. Through the security panel by the front door, I saw a delivery van. Unusual since online orders typically went to a pickup location in town. Delivery for Mrs. Mitchell, the driver said when I opened the door, holding out a small package and a signature pad. The package was lightweight, wrapped in nondescript brown paper with a shipping label from a company I didn't recognize. My name and this address, but no return information. After the driver left, I stood in the entrance hall, turning the package over in my hands. My instinct was to open it immediately, but something held me back. Daniel's disappearance had shattered my trust, not just in him, but in the basic predictability of life. Finally, I took the package to the kitchen island and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a simple wooden box with a small brass latch. When I opened it, my breath caught. A single key lay on a bed of velvet. Not a house key or car key, but the kind used for safe deposit boxes. Attached was a small tag with a series of numbers, not a combination, but what looked like geographical coordinates. Beneath the key was a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, I opened it, immediately recognizing Daniel's handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. I never meant for you to be caught in the middle, Nora. The safe deposit box will explain everything. Be careful who you trust. I'm sorry. D. I stared at the note, reading it over and over until the words blurred together. Gone where? Caught in the middle of what? My phone rang again, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, too overwhelmed to speak to anyone. When it beeped with the voicemail notification, I played it on speaker, expecting a telemarketer Or perhaps my mother calling from a friend's phone since I'd been ignoring her calls. 2. Instead, a man's voice, unfamiliar, accented, filled the kitchen. Mrs. Mitchell, I believe you've recently received a package. I strongly advise you not to follow the instructions inside. Your husband made certain arrangements that have consequences beyond his understanding. For your own safety, leave the house immediately. We'll be in touch. The message ended with a click, leaving nothing but silence and the sudden realization that whatever had caused Daniel to disappear hadn't ended with him. I replayed the voicemail 5 times, my hands shaking worse with each listen. The man's accent was Eastern European, Russian, maybe, or Polish. His tone carried authority, not menace, but the warning itself was threat enough. Leave the house. Immediately. My first instinct was to call Maggie, but I stopped myself. Involving her meant putting her at risk, and I had no idea what kind of danger I was facing. The local police? They hadn't taken Daniel's disappearance seriously. Why would they believe some cryptic package and voicemail constituted an emergency? Stood in the kitchen, paralyzed by indecision, when headlights swept across the windows. A vehicle was coming up the long drive, moving fast. Fight or flight took over. I grabbed my purse, the wooden box with the key, and Daniel's note, then darted through the kitchen to the mudroom at the back of the house. The contractors had installed a security system, but it wasn't activated yet. Another item on the endless to-do list for our perfect life that now lay in ruins. As I slipped out the back door into the gathering dusk, I heard car doors slam at the front of the house. Keeping low, I skirted the edge of the property toward the small groundskeeper's cottage that sat partially hidden behind a stand of mature oaks. Daniel had planned to renovate it eventually, but for now it remained untouched, a dilapidated structure with broken windows and a sagging roof. Perfect for hiding. I crouched behind the cottage, peering around the corner toward the main house. 2 men in dark clothing moved with practiced efficiency, one circling toward the back, while the other entered through the front door I'd left unlocked in my panic. My breath clouded in the cooling air as I weighed my options. My car was parked in the front drive, completely inaccessible. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away. My phone had 2 bars of service, enough to call for help. But who? And what would I say? Help. My missing husband sent me a cryptic message and now strange. Men are at my house? The coordinates. Whatever Daniel had left in that safe deposit box might explain what was happening. I pulled out my phone and entered the numbers into a mapping application. The location pinged in downtown Ashford, about 30 miles from here. The First Metropolitan Bank, a twig snapped nearby, and I froze. The second man had circled all the way around the property and was approaching the cottage. I hadn't been as careful as I'd thought. With no time to plan, I did the only thing I could. I ran. Away from the house, away from the men, straight into the densely wooded area that bordered the eastern edge of the property. Branches whipped at my face as I plunged into the darkness, the sound of pursuit close behind. "Mrs. Mitchell!" the man called after me, his accent matching the voicemail. "We are not here to harm you." Yeah, right. Men who didn't intend harm didn't chase women through dark woods. I kept running, grateful for my habit of daily morning jogs. That gave me stamina now when I needed it most. The woods grew thicker, darker, but I pushed ahead blindly, using my phone's flashlight only when absolutely necessary to avoid tripping over exposed roots. After what felt like an eternity, the sounds of pursuit faded. I stopped behind a massive oak tree, lungs burning, to catch my breath and get my bearings. The property backed up to a state forest that eventually led to a highway. If I could reach the road, I might flag down a passing car. As I stood there, contemplating my next move, my phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Mitchell, please stop running. We were associates of your husband. The men looking for you work for Alexei Volkov. They will not be the last. The safe deposit box is already being watched. Call this number when you're safe. I stared at the message, a fresh wave of fear and confusion washing over me. Associates? Alexei Volkov? The name meant nothing to me, but the warning resonated with the voicemail I'd received earlier. Whatever Daniel had been involved in, it was clearly dangerous, and now that danger had found me. A distant shout reminded me I wasn't safe yet. I pocketed my phone and pushed deeper into the forest, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. After about 20 minutes, the trees began to thin, and I caught the distant hum of traffic. The highway. I emerged from the tree line onto an embankment overlooking a 4-lane highway. Late evening traffic sped past below, headlights cutting through the darkness. I scrambled down the slope, nearly losing my footing several times before reaching the shoulder of the road. Using my phone's flashlight, I flagged down a passing truck. The driver, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a wary expression, rolled down her window just enough to hear me. "My car broke down back there," I lied, trying to control my ragged breathing. "Could you give me a ride to the next town? I need to call a tow truck." She studied me for a moment. My disheveled appearance, the small cuts on my face from branches, the desperation in my eyes, then nodded. "Get in. I'm heading to Millfield." Millfield was in the opposite direction from Ashford and the bank, but it would do for now. I needed distance and time to think. As we drove in silence, I checked my phone again. 2 more missed calls from Maggie, a text from my mother, and nothing from the unknown number. I scrolled back to their message, reading it again, trying to make sense of this new reality where my husband had associates, and men with Eastern European accents were chasing me through the woods. "Rough night?" the truck driver asked, breaking the silence. I looked up, realizing I'd been staring at my phone with tears streaming down my face. "You could say that." "Husband troubles?" I laughed hollowly. "How did you know?" She shrugged. "Seen that look before? In my own mirror." She paused. "You're not in danger, are you?" The irony of her question, given what I'd just fled from, nearly made me laugh again. Instead, I wiped away my tears. "It's complicated." "Always is." She nodded toward a roadside motel coming up on the right. "That place is clean and the owner doesn't ask questions. Cash only, though." I hadn't even considered where I would go. My purse contained about $200 in cash, emergency money I kept on hand out of habit. "That sounds perfect. Thank you." She pulled into the motel parking lot and waited until I'd secured a room from the sleepy clerk at the front desk. As I turned to wave goodbye, she rolled down her window one last time. "Whatever you're running from, honey, make sure it's worth running to something better." Her words stayed with me as I entered the motel room and secured every lock. The space was basic but clean. A double bed, a small desk, a bathroom with a shower that had seen better days. I sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing myself to fully process the events of the day. My husband had vanished in Italy, drained our accounts, and apparently been involved with people dangerous enough to send men after me. He'd left me a key to a safe deposit box that was already being watched, according to a mysterious text. And now I was hiding in a roadside motel, afraid to contact my own family. Who was Daniel Mitchell? The man I'd married, the brilliant, passionate professor of architectural history who quoted obscure poetry and couldn't cook to save his life, seemed increasingly like a character he'd played rather than his true self. I pulled out the wooden box again, examining the key and coordinates more carefully. The tag attached to the key had a number written on the back that I hadn't noticed before. 357. Probably the box number. Daniel's note provided little comfort. "I never meant for you to be caught in the middle." In the middle of what? And if he was sorry, why had he left me vulnerable to whatever danger was now pursuing me? My phone vibrated again. Maggie calling for the 4th time today. I couldn't keep avoiding her, especially now. She needed to know I was safe, even if I couldn't tell her everything. "Where the hell have you been?" she demanded when I answered. I've been calling for hours. I'm okay, Maggie. I just needed some space. Space from what? Your phone? I closed my eyes, trying to decide how much to share. Something happened. I can't explain everything right now, but I'm not at the house. Her voice sharpened with concern. What do you mean something happened? Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. Really. I just need a few days to figure some things out. This is about Daniel, isn't it? Did he contact you? Not exactly. I took a deep breath. Maggie, I need you to do something for me, and I need you not to ask questions. The silence on her end spoke volumes, but eventually she said, What do you need? Can you look into someone named Alexei Volkov? Discreetly, through your firm's resources. A Russian name? Nora, what the hell is going on? Please, Maggie. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. She sighed heavily. Fine. But I'm logging this as a potential client consultation, so it's covered by privilege, and you're going to tell me everything when you're ready. Deal. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long moment before making one more call to the unknown number that had texted me earlier. It rang twice before a man answered. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm glad you're safe. Who are you? I demanded. And how do you know my husband? My name is Marcus Vega. I worked with Daniel on several projects over the years. His voice was calm, professional, with a slight accent I couldn't place. We need to meet in person. It's not safe to discuss this over the phone. Not safe? Like being chased through the woods by men with guns wasn't safe? They were armed? He sounded genuinely surprised. That's concerning. It means Volkov is taking this more seriously than we anticipated. Taking what more seriously? What was Daniel involved in? Mrs. Mitchell. Nora, I corrected automatically. Nora, he amended. Your husband was a good man in a difficult position. He believed he was protecting you by keeping you in the dark. I disagreed with that approach, but it wasn't my decision to make. Well, he's gone now, and I'm the one dealing with the consequences, I said bitterly. So start talking. Not over. The phone, Marcus insisted. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's a cafe in Ashford called the Copper Kettle, noon. Ashford, the same town as the bank with the safe deposit box. How do I know I can trust you? You don't, he said simply. But right now, I'm the only one who can help you understand what Daniel was involved in and why he left. After we disconnected, I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the fear and confusion of the day. As steam filled the small bathroom, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, eyes wide with uncertainty, hair tangled from my flight through the woods, wedding ring still on my finger, despite everything. 43 days since Daniel had vanished in Florence. 43 days of questions without answers. Tomorrow, perhaps, that would change. But as I slipped into bed, exhaustion finally overtaking my adrenaline-fueled state, one question burned brighter than all others. Had I ever really known my husband at all? Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by nightmares of faceless men chasing me through endless woods. I woke at dawn, disoriented in the unfamiliar motel room, momentarily forgetting the events that had driven me here. Then, reality crashed. Back and with it, a surprising clarity. I needed information, and I had two potential sources, Marcus Vega and the safe deposit box. Both in Ashford. Both potentially dangerous to access. But sitting in this motel room, waiting for answers to come to me, wouldn't solve anything. After a quick breakfast from the vending machine, I approached the motel owner, a weathered woman, in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I need a ride to Ashford, I explained. Is there a bus or taxi service? She assessed me thoughtfully. Trouble with your car? Something like that. My nephew heads that way every morning, for work at the factory. He could drop you. She named a price that seemed reasonable, and I agreed. Her nephew turned out to be a taciturn 20-something who asked no questions and seemed content with silence during the 40-minute drive. Perfect for my current state of mind. Ashford was larger than I'd expected. A mid-sized town with a revitalized downtown area surrounded by the usual sprawl of chain stores and residential developments. The nephew dropped me at a coffee shop near the center of town. First Metropolitan is 2 blocks that way, he said, nodding east. It was the first indication he'd been listening when I'd mentioned needing to visit the bank. I had 3 hours before my meeting with Marcus. Enough time to see what Daniel had left in that safe deposit box, assuming I could access it without running into the people who were supposedly watching it. The bank occupied a stately brick building on a corner lot. I surveyed the street from across the intersection, looking for anyone who might be conducting surveillance. Nothing obvious stood out, but then again, I wasn't exactly trained in counterintelligence. For all I knew, I was being watched already. Inside, the bank was quietly busy with morning customers. I approached a young woman at the information desk, summoning my most composed expression. "I need to access my safe deposit box," I said. "Of course," she smiled professionally. "Do you have your key and identification?" I presented both, and she directed me to another desk where an older man processed my request with efficient detachment. He checked my ID, matched it to their records, and then escorted me to a secure room filled with metal drawers of various sizes. "Box 357, he announced, using his key alongside mine to open a medium-sized drawer. "I'll leave you to your privacy. Press the button when you're finished." When the door closed behind him, I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the metal box now sitting on the table before me. Whatever Daniel had hidden here represented my best chance at understanding what was happening. With a deep breath, I opened the lid. Inside lay several items: a thick manila envelope, a smaller blue envelope, a USB drive, and a handgun. I recoiled, at the sight of the weapon, nearly knocking over the chair behind me. Daniel hated guns. He'd refused to even consider one for home security when we'd discussed it after a break-in at a neighbor's apartment. Yet here was a pistol, a Glock, from what little I knew about firearms, carefully placed in a box only he could have accessed. Avoiding the gun, I reached for the manila envelope first. It contained several passports, 3 different ones, each with Daniel's photo, but different names. French, Canadian, and British identities, all looking officially issued. Alongside them were driver's licenses and credit cards matching each alias. My stomach clenched. False identities. Professional-looking ones. The blue envelope held something even more disturbing: a stack of photographs. Me shopping at the farmer's market, me leaving my translation office, me jogging in the park near our old apartment, all taken with a telephoto lens, all within the last year, judging by my clothing and hairstyle. Someone had been watching me, long before Daniel disappeared. The USB drive would have to wait until I had access to a computer, but its presence suggested digital information too sensitive to leave in physical form. I sat heavily in the chair, trying to process what I was seeing. My husband, a university professor with a passion for historical architecture, had multiple false identities and had been aware that someone was surveilling his wife. The implications were staggering. Taking a steadying breath, I re-examined each item, looking for anything I might have missed. In the manila envelope, behind the passports, I found several bank statements for accounts I'd never known about. Accounts with balances that made our joint savings look like pocket change. One account statement in particular caught my eye: a wire transfer dated 3 days before our anniversary trip. $5 million to an account in the Cayman Islands. The same day Daniel had insisted on handling the final payment to the contractors for our house renovations. The blue envelope contained one additional item I'd overlooked initially: a small note in Daniel's handwriting. Evidence of Volkov's surveillance operation. He knows about your morning routine, your office, your friends. This is why I left, to draw him away from you. If you're reading this, my plan failed. Trust Marcus. He can help. The house is compromised. I'm sorry, Nora, for everything. I read the note twice more, anger building with each pass. The house is compromised. He'd known our dream home, the place he'd convinced me to pour our future into, was somehow dangerous. And he'd let me continue living there, unaware. Carefully, I repacked everything except the note and one of the bank statements showing the Cayman transfer. The gun I left untouched, though something told me I might regret that decision later. After returning the box to its drawer and completing the necessary paperwork, I exited the bank into the bright late-morning sunshine. No one seemed to be following me, but the knowledge that I'd been under surveillance before made every passing glance feel threatening. With an hour still remaining before my meeting with Marcus, I found a small electronics store and purchased a prepaid phone with cash. Then I located a public library, where I could use a computer without leaving a digital trail. The USB drive contained only 2 files, a PDF document and a video file. The PDF was a dossier on Alexei Volkov, pages of information about a Russian oligarch with interests in energy, technology, and apparently architectural history. Specific passages were highlighted, including references to Volkov's private collection of historical artifacts and manuscripts related to ancient building techniques, Daniel's academic specialty. The video file was brief, just under 2 minutes. It showed Daniel in what appeared to be a hotel room, looking directly at the camera. The timestamp indicated it was recorded the day before he disappeared in Florence. Nora, he began, his familiar voice sending a jolt through me. If you're watching this, things have gone very wrong. I need you to understand that everything I've done, including what I'm about to do, has been to protect you. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I knew well. I made a mistake 3 years ago when I agreed to authenticate some items for Alexei Volkov. I didn't know who he was then, just a wealthy collector willing to pay handsomely for my expertise. By the time I realized what I'd gotten involved in, it was too late to simply walk away. Daniel leaned closer to the camera. The house was supposed to be our fresh start, somewhere safe, somewhere Volkov's people couldn't easily monitor. But I recently discovered that's not the case. He glanced away briefly. I can't explain everything now, but Marcus has the full story. I'm leaving tomorrow. If I can convince Volkov I've taken what he wants, he'll follow me and leave you alone. His expression softened. I love you, Nora, more than you'll ever know, and I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark. I thought I was protecting you, but I see, now that I've only put you in greater danger. Forgive me. The video ended abruptly, leaving me staring at a black screen, tears streaming down my face. The raw emotion in his voice, the genuine fear and regret. This was the Daniel I knew. Not the man with false passports and secret bank accounts, but my husband, clearly terrified and trying desperately to protect me from something. I wiped my tears, aware of the time. The Copper Kettle Cafe was just a few blocks away, according to my phone's map. Marcus Vega might have the answers the USB drive had only partially provided. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived, but I spotted him immediately. A lean, dark-haired man in his 40s sitting alone in a corner booth, his attention seemingly on the newspaper before him, but his awareness clearly encompassing the entire room. He looked up as I approached, recognition immediate in his eyes. Mrs. Mitchell? He stood, offering his hand. Thank you for coming. I slid into the booth across from him, studying his face. Nothing about him screamed danger, but there was an intensity to his gaze that suggested he was assessing me just as carefully. I went to the bank, I said without preamble. I saw what Daniel left, the passports, the surveillance photos. I paused. The video. Marcus nodded slowly. Then you understand some of what your husband was involved in. No, I corrected sharply. I understand that he was involved in something, but I have no idea what. You said you would explain." He glanced around before leaning forward, voice lowered. "Daniel was recruited by an intelligence agency 5 years ago. His academic expertise and travel opportunities made him a valuable asset for gaining access to certain individuals and locations." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "An intelligence agency? You're saying my husband was a spy?" "Not exactly. More of an occasional contractor. He maintained his genuine academic career, but sometimes provided services that leveraged his expertise and position. Authentication of artifacts, making connections with specific collectors or scholars, gathering information during conferences. I thought of Daniel's frequent academic trips abroad, his occasional meetings with private collectors that he'd always described as side gigs to supplement our income. All those late nights working on authentication projects in his campus, office, and Alexei Volkov?" I pressed. Marcus's expression darkened. "A complication. Daniel was tasked with getting close to him, using Volkov's interest in architectural artifacts as an entry point. The goal was intelligence gathering only, but Volkov eventually asked Daniel to authenticate some items that turned out to be looted from archaeological sites in Syria. By then, Daniel was in too deep to refuse without raising suspicion. So what happened in Florence? Why did he run? Daniel discovered that Volkov suspected his true purpose. He found evidence that Volkov's people had been monitoring both of you for months." Marcus nodded toward my bag, where I'd placed the surveillance photos. His handler, his agency contact, suggested extracting both of you immediately, but Daniel had another idea. "To lead them away from me," I murmured, remembering the video. "Exactly. He believed if he disappeared with what Volkov thought was valuable intelligence, Volkov would focus on finding him and leave you alone." Marcus sighed. "It was an unauthorized plan, but Daniel was determined." A horrible thought occurred to me. "Is he dead?" "We don't believe so," Marcus said carefully. "There's been no evidence suggesting Daniel has been captured or killed. Our most recent intelligence indicates he's still moving, staying ahead of Volkov's people." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by fresh anger. Daniel was alive, choosing to remain hidden, choosing to leave me in danger and ignorance. "And the house?" I asked. "He said it was compromised." Marcus hesitated. "The property was purchased through a shell company that we believe Volkov has connections to. Daniel didn't know this initially. By the time he discovered it, renovations were underway, and he found irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "Surveillance equipment built into the structure, listening devices, cameras." He met my gaze directly. "Your dream house was designed to be a sophisticated monitoring station. That safe you mentioned finding? It wasn't in the plans because Volkov's people installed it. We believe they're using the property as a base of operations in the region." I felt physically ill. The house that Daniel had been so passionate about, that I was now living in alone, was essentially a surveillance trap, and he'd known before he left. "Why wouldn't he just tell me?" I demanded, voice cracking. "Why leave me there, knowing it was dangerous?" "He made arrangements for you to receive the package with the key before you returned home," Marcus explained. "You were supposed to access the safe deposit box immediately, then go to a secure location we had prepared. Something must have delayed the delivery. Or someone had intercepted it," I realized. The package had arrived only yesterday, nearly 6 weeks after I'd returned from Italy. "So what now?" I asked. "Volkov's men found me at the house. They know I've accessed the safe deposit box. Where does that leave me?" Marcus's expression was grim. "In significant danger, I'm afraid. Volkov will assume Daniel has passed information to you. Information worth killing for. But I don't know anything. They have no way of being certain of that." He reached across the table, not quite, touching my hand. "The agency can help. Protective custody, new identity if necessary." The thought was overwhelming. abandoning my entire life because of choices Daniel had made without my knowledge or consent. And if I refuse, then I strongly suggest you don't return to the house or contact anyone from your previous life. Volkov's reach is extensive. Anyone connected to you could be leveraged to get to you. As I struggled to process this, Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression immediately hardening. We need to leave. Now. Volkov's men have been spotted in town, asking questions at the bank. Fear flooded back, sharp and immediate. How did they find me so quickly? It doesn't matter. What matters is getting you somewhere safe. He stood, tossing cash on the table. I have a car behind the cafe. We need to move. As I rose to follow him, a new text arrived on my phone from Maggie. Found information on Volkov. Dangerous. Where are you? Need to talk ASAP. I showed Marcus the message. Your sister? He asked. When I nodded, he frowned. How did she know to look into Volkov? I asked her to. She's a lawyer with resources. His expression turned alarmed. You involved your sister in this? When? Last night, I admitted. I didn't know what else to do. Marcus cursed under his breath. If she's been searching for information on Volkov, his people may have been alerted. Digital monitoring is their specialty. He met my gaze, urgency evident. You need to warn her. Tell her to go somewhere public, somewhere crowded, and wait for further instructions. As we hurried toward the back exit of the cafe, I typed a frantic message to Maggie. Her response came immediately. Too late. Men at my office asking for me. Hiding in conference room. What do I do? I showed Marcus, my heart pounding. Give me the address, he said grimly, pushing open the door to the alley where a nondescript sedan waited. We need to get to her before they do. Maggie's law firm occupied the top 3 floors of a glass and steel building in downtown Ashford. As Marcus drove with controlled urgency, I maintained a steady stream of texts with my sister, who had barricaded herself in a conference room, on the 14th floor. 2 men, she reported, claiming to be potential clients, asked for me specifically. Reception told them I was unavailable, but they're waiting in the lobby. Stay put, I typed back. Help coming. Do not engage with them. Marcus parked in a loading zone half a block from the building. We need a plan, he said, studying the entrance. Those men will be watching the elevators and stairs. There's a service entrance, I said, remembering my previous visits to Maggie's office. Delivery access through the parking garage. He nodded. You know the building layout? Well enough. I'd visited several times for lunch or after-work drinks at the rooftop bar Maggie's firm maintained for client events. Then here's what we do. I'll create a distraction in the lobby while you access the service entrance and get to your sister. There's an emergency stairwell near the conference rooms? Yes, at the north end of the floor. Get her down that stairwell. To the parking garage level. I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. If I'm not there, take this. He handed me a key fob. And get to the safe house. He gave me an address in a nearby suburb, instructions for accessing the property, and a phone number to call only in extreme emergency. What kind of distraction? I asked. The kind that demands security's attention. His expression suggested it was better I didn't know details. Wait until you see commotion in the lobby, then move. We separated, and I positioned myself in a cafe across the street with a clear view of the building's main entrance. After 7 excruciating minutes, I saw what could only be Marcus's distraction, a delivery truck suddenly lurching forward and crashing into the decorative fountain in the building's plaza. As predicted, security personnel rushed outside, and even the men in the lobby moved toward the entrance to see the commotion. I slipped across the street and around to the service entrance, using a delivery truck's arrival to gain access to the garage. The service elevator required a key card, but I recalled Maggie mentioning that the cleaning staff propped the doors during shift changes. Sure enough, a wooden doorstop held the service elevator open. I slipped inside and pressed 14. Exiting into a service corridor lined with supply closets, I navigated toward the main office area. A text from Maggie confirmed she was still safely in the Harrison conference room, named with legal firm pretentiousness after some founding partner from the previous century. The office floor was eerily quiet for a workday. Through glass walls, I could see several attorneys and paralegals working, seemingly unaware of any threat. Had the men remained in the lobby, or had they somehow gained access to the upper floors? I moved quickly but casually past administrative stations, trying to appear as if I belonged. The Harrison room was near the northeast corner, a large space with frosted glass walls that offered privacy for sensitive client meetings. When I reached it, I knocked softly in the pattern Maggie and I had used as children. 2 quick taps. Pause. 3 quick taps. The door opened a crack, then wider as she recognized me. Nora! Thank God. She pulled me inside, then stepped back, eyes widening. What happened to your face? I touched my cheek, having forgotten the scratches from my flight through the woods. Long story. We need to move. Now. Not until you tell me what the hell is going on. Maggie's lawyer face was in full effect, the expression that had reportedly made junior associates weep during depositions. I did that research you asked for. Alexei Volkov is connected to organized crime, energy market manipulation, and at least 3 suspected political assassinations. Why are you involved with someone like that? I'm not. Daniel was. I grabbed her arm. I promise I'll explain everything. But right now, there are men in your building who work for Volkov, and they're looking for both of us. That finally broke through her resistance. My car's in the garage. We can... Too risky. They might be. Watching it. I glanced at my phone. 8 minutes had elapsed since I'd entered the building. We need to take the emergency stairs to the parking level. Someone's meeting us there. Someone who? A friend of Daniel's. He's helping me. Her expression said she had about 1,000 follow-up questions, but survival instinct won out. She grabbed her purse and phone, leaving everything else behind. We were halfway to the emergency stairwell when the elevator chimed. Both of us froze as the doors opened, revealing one of the men from the house. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the same Eastern European features I'd glimpsed during my escape. His eyes locked with mine, recognition immediate. He reached inside his jacket. Run. I shoved Maggie toward the stairwell as the man shouted something in what sounded like Russian. We burst through the stairwell door and started downward, taking the steps 2 at a time. Behind us, the door slammed open again. 14 floors. Maggie gasped as we rounded the first landing. We'll never make it to the bottom before he catches us. She was right. Heavy footsteps echoed above us, gaining quickly. We don't need to go all the way down, I said, remembering the building layout. The 8th floor connects to the adjacent building through a sky bridge. We continued our descent, the pursuer closing the gap with each flight. As we reached the 9th floor landing, the door above us crashed open. Stop! The man commanded, his accent thick. Mrs. Mitchell, we only want to talk. Men with guns who just wanted to talk didn't chase women down stairwells. I yanked open the 8th floor door, pulling Maggie through onto a quiet hallway lined with law library stacks. This floor housed research resources shared by several firms in the building complex. The sky bridge is that way, Maggie pointed, catching her breath. We hurried through the stacks, hearing the stairwell door open behind us. The sky bridge connected to a neighboring building that housed various businesses, including a bank and several tech startups. If we could cross it, we might lose our pursuer in the busy office complex. The glass-enclosed walkway stretched across the gap between buildings, offering dizzying views of the street below. Halfway across, I glanced back to see the man emerging from the law library area, scanning for us. Keep moving, I urged Maggie. Don't look back. We reached the other side just as he spotted us, quickening his pace. The connected building's 8th floor housed a tech incubator space, an open-plan area filled with small startup teams working at clustered desks, perfect for disappearing. We wove through the workspace, ignoring confused glances from programmers and designers. Behind us, I could hear our pursuer attempting to navigate the same space less gracefully, his size and urgency drawing attention. "There's another stairwell on the far side," Maggie said, leading the way. "We can take it down to the main lobby. It's always busy this time of day." We pushed through the door into another stairwell, descending as quickly as we dared. No sounds of pursuit yet, but I had no doubt he was still searching. The main lobby was indeed busy, a steady stream of people entering and exiting for the lunch hour. We blended into the crowd, moving toward the street exit. "The parking garage," I reminded Maggie. "We need to circle back to meet Marcus." "This way." She led me through the lobby to an exterior door that opened onto a pedestrian walkway connecting both buildings at ground level. "The garage access is around the corner." We were halfway to the garage entrance when I spotted another man in a dark suit speaking urgently into a phone, his gaze sweeping the area. Not the same one who had chased us down the stairs, but similar in build and demeanor. "There's another one," I whispered, slowing my pace. "By the garage entrance." Maggie assessed the situation with lawyer-like precision. "Service alley," she said, nodding toward a narrow passage between buildings. "Delivery trucks use it. It connects to the main garage area." We altered course, trying to appear casual while moving with purpose. The alley was dim and smelled of garbage, but blessedly empty. It curved around the building's rear, eventually opening onto the loading area adjacent to the parking garage. "The parking level should be through there," Maggie pointed to a heavy door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." I checked the time, 14 minutes since I'd entered the building. Marcus would be expecting us any moment. The door was unlocked, opening onto a concrete stairwell that led down to the parking level. We descended cautiously, alert for any sound that might indicate our pursuers had anticipated this route. The parking level was dimly lit and echoing, rows of cars creating a labyrinth of potential hiding places, for us or for those hunting us. I texted Marcus our location. "Southeast corner," came his immediate reply. "Gray sedan." We made our way through the garage, staying close to larger vehicles for cover. As we neared the southeast section, I spotted the same nondescript car from behind the cafe. Marcus leaned against it casually, appearing to anyone watching like a man waiting for a colleague. When he saw us, he straightened, eyes scanning behind us for pursuit. "Any problems?" he asked as we approached. "They found us on the 14th floor," I explained quickly. "We lost them through the connected building, but they're still searching." "Then we need to move." He unlocked the car, gesturing for us to get in. "Your sister?" "Maggie," I confirmed, as she climbed into the back seat, wariness evident in her expression. "Marcus Vega," he introduced himself, sliding into the driver's seat beside me. "I worked with Daniel." "So I've heard," Maggie replied coolly, though I'm still waiting for an explanation of what exactly that means. In due time. Marcus started the car, pulling smoothly out of the parking space. "First priority is getting clear of the area." As we approached the garage exit, he handed me a baseball cap. "Put this on and look down at your phone when we pass." "The security booth. They'll be watching security cameras by now." I complied, understanding his concern. Next to me, Marcus adopted a relaxed posture, smiling casually at the parking attendant as we exited. No one stopped us or seemed to take special notice. Only when we were several blocks away, merging onto a highway heading out of the city center, did the tension in the car ease slightly. "Now," Maggie said from the back seat, "would someone please tell me what's going on? Why are men with guns chasing my sister? And what does it have to do with Daniel's disappearance?" I turned to face her, seeing the fear beneath her composed exterior. My brave, brilliant sister who had always protected me growing up was now caught in dangerous currents because of me. Daniel wasn't just a professor, I began, the explanation still feeling surreal even as I said it. He was working for some kind of intelligence agency. Maggie's expression shifted from skeptical to stunned as I recounted everything I'd learned over the past 24 hours, the safe deposit box contents, the surveillance photos, Marcus's explanation of Daniel's involvement with Volkov. She shook her head. That's insane. Daniel? Our Daniel who gets queasy at horror movies and cried when you gave him that first edition architecture book for Christmas? People contain multitudes, Marcus commented, eyes scanning the road ahead, and the mirrors continuously. Your brother-in-law was exceptionally good at compartmentalizing. So these men, Maggie pressed, they think Nora has information from Daniel? Information worth killing for? Essentially, yes. Marcus took an exit, transitioning to a less traveled road. Volkov believes Daniel stole something from him, something beyond just intelligence about his operations. Did he? I asked, realizing this was a question I hadn't thought to pose earlier. Steal something? Marcus's hesitation was brief, but noticeable. Not in the way Volkov believes. But yes, Daniel acquired certain information that makes Volkov uncomfortable. What kind of information? Evidence linking Volkov to the theft and illegal sale of cultural artifacts from conflict zones, enough to trigger international sanctions against his business interests and possibly criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions. And where is this evidence now? Maggie asked, lawyer instincts clearly engaged. Secure, Marcus replied vaguely. But Volkov doesn't know that. He believes Daniel passed it to Nora before disappearing. The weight of the situation settled over the car. I was being hunted not for anything I had done, or even for anything I possessed, but for what Volkov believed I might know. The safe house I mentioned is about 20 minutes from here, Marcus continued. You'll both be secure there while we arrange more permanent protection. Permanent protection, Maggie echoed. You mean witness protection? New identities? Something similar, yes. She leaned forward. I have a life, a career. I can't just disappear because my brother-in-law made poor choices. Your brother-in-law? Was trying to stop the systematic looting of cultural heritage sites, Marcus countered, an edge entering his voice. He was doing something that mattered. At the expense of his wife's safety, Maggie shot back. He left Nora vulnerable and ignorant, and now she's paying the price for his heroics. The criticism of Daniel stung, even as part of me acknowledged its truth. He had kept me in the dark, had left me exposed to dangers I didn't understand. Yet the video message replayed in my mind. His genuine fear, his remorse. Had he truly believed he was protecting me, or had I simply been collateral damage in whatever game he was playing? We're being followed, Marcus announced calmly, interrupting my thoughts. Black SUV, 2 cars back, tinted windows. I twisted in my seat, spotting the vehicle he'd indicated. It maintained a consistent distance, not obviously aggressive, but definitely tracking our movements. Volkov's people? I asked. Likely. Marcus took a sudden turn onto a side road. Let's find out how interested they are. The SUV followed, closing the gap slightly. Very interested, it seems, Maggie observed, tension evident in her voice. Marcus accelerated, the sedan responding with surprising power for such an unassuming vehicle. Change of plans, he said, taking another turn that led us deeper into a residential area. We need to lose them before heading to the safe house. What followed was a tense game of cat and mouse through suburban streets and eventually onto rural roads as Marcus attempted to shake our pursuers. The SUV stayed with us, maintaining a professional distance while clearly unwilling to lose us. They're good, Marcus muttered, checking the mirrors again. Too good for local muscle. These are Volkov's direct operatives. Meaning? I prompted. Meaning they're not just going to give up. He made another sudden turn onto a gravel road that cut through dense woods. And they won't hesitate to use force if they get the opportunity. The trees closed in around us, the road narrowing and winding deeper into the forest. The SUV continued to follow, dust billowing behind both vehicles. Where are we going? Maggie asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. Creating options, Marcus replied cryptically. Hold on. He suddenly accelerated hard, putting distance between us and the SUV, then took a sharp turn onto what barely qualified as a track through the trees. Branches scraped against the windows as we bounced along the uneven surface. There's a ranger station about 2 miles ahead, he explained. Forest Service personnel, communications equipment, potential witnesses. If they try anything too direct. The car crested a small rise, then Marcus swore under his breath. Ahead of us, blocking the narrow track, was another vehicle, a dark sedan positioned sideways across the path. They anticipated our route, he said, braking hard and throwing the car into reverse. They're not just following, they're herding us. Before he could complete the maneuver, the SUV appeared behind us, effectively boxing us in on the narrow forest track. Options? Maggie asked, her voice remarkably steady given the circumstances. Marcus reached beneath his seat, withdrawing. A handgun similar to the one I'd seen in the safe deposit box. Limited, he admitted. Stay in the car. Lock the doors if I have to get out. As men emerged from both vehicles, Marcus lowered his window just enough to communicate. I count 4, he told us. All armed, though they're keeping weapons concealed. For now. What do they want? I asked, fear constricting my throat. To take you, most likely. Question you somewhere private. His expression was grim. That cannot happen. One of the men approached, hands visible but posture unmistakably threatening. He stopped a few yards from our car, saying something in Russian. Another man, emerging from the lead sedan, responded in English. Tell Mrs. Mitchell we only wish to speak with her. No one needs to be hurt. Marcus kept the gun low, out of sight but ready. Nora, when I tell you, both of you need to get out and run toward that dense brush on the right. Don't stop. Don't look back. The ranger station is about half a mile in that direction. And you? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. I'll be right behind you. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Ready? Before I could respond, a new sound cut through the standoff, the distinctive whoomp-whoomp of helicopter rotors approaching rapidly. The men surrounding our car looked up, momentarily distracted. Marcus used the opportunity to hit the accelerator, jerking the wheel hard to the right. The car lurched forward at an angle, scraping past the blocking sedan with a scream of metal on metal. As we fishtailed back onto the track, gunfire erupted behind us. The back window shattered, sending glass fragments spraying across the interior. Maggie cried out, ducking down in the back seat. Stay down, Marcus shouted, pushing the car to its limits on the uneven surface. Are you hit? No, Maggie gasped. Just glass. I twisted to check on her, heart pounding. She was pressed against the floor, arms covering her head, but appeared uninjured. The helicopter grew louder, appearing above the tree line ahead of us. Not a news or police helicopter, but a sleek black craft with no visible markings. Is that? I started to ask. Mine, Marcus confirmed, relief evident in his voice. Extraction team. We're going to make it. As we burst from the tree line into a small clearing, the helicopter descended, hovering just above the ground. 2 men in tactical gear provided cover as Marcus skidded to a stop. Go! He shouted, throwing open his door. Run for the helicopter! We scrambled out, hunched low as instructed by the tactical team. Behind us, vehicles crashed through the underbrush as our pursuers fought to catch up. The helicopter's rotors whipped my hair as I helped Maggie climb aboard, then scrambled in after her. Marcus was the last to board, diving in as gunfire resumed, from the edge of the clearing. Go, go, go! He shouted to the pilot, who needed no encouragement. The helicopter lifted rapidly, banking hard as bullets pinged off its armored underside. Within moments, we were racing away from the clearing, the dense forest canopy soon obscuring any view of our pursuers. Only then did I release the breath I'd been holding, turning to confirm Maggie was truly unharmed. She sat across from me, pale but composed, brushing glass fragments from her clothing. "So," she said with remarkable dryness, "this is what Daniel did for a living?" Despite everything, the fear, the danger, the shock of the past 24 hours, I found myself laughing. Not from humor, but from the sheer absurdity of our situation. "Apparently," I managed, the laughter giving way to the tears I'd been holding back. "Apparently this is what my husband did instead of just grading papers like a normal professor." Marcus, checking a wound on his arm where glass had cut him, offered a sympathetic smile. For what it's worth, he was very good at it, one of our best. As the helicopter carried us to safety, temporary though it might be, I stared out at the landscape passing below, wondering where Daniel was at this exact moment. Was he safe? Was he thinking of me? Did he regret his choices? And most importantly, would I ever get the chance to ask him these questions face to face? The helicopter deposited us at a private airfield 30 miles outside Ashford. No markings on the buildings, no identifying information on the few personnel visible on the tarmac. Just a nondescript hangar and a small terminal building where we were quickly ushered inside. "Welcome to nowhere," Marcus said, leading us into a sparsely furnished room with tactical maps on the walls and communication equipment humming quietly in the corner. "Officially, this facility doesn't exist." Maggie sank into a chair, the adrenaline crash finally hitting her. Neither do we, apparently. A medic checked us for injuries while Marcus conferred with the tactical team that had extracted us. I caught fragments of their conversation. Perimeter breach, protocol violation, operational security, suggesting that our forest encounter hadn't gone according to whatever plan existed. When the medic finished confirming we were unharmed, aside from minor cuts and bruises, a woman entered, mid-50s, silver hair cropped short, wearing civilian clothes that nonetheless conveyed military precision. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Director Claire Harmon. I knew your husband." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was Daniel's boss, or at least someone high enough in the hierarchy to call herself a director. "Where is he?" I asked directly, too exhausted for pleasantries. "We don't know his exact location," she admitted. "Daniel went off protocol in Florence. He's maintained minimal contact through encrypted channels, but deliberately keeps his movements unpredictable." "To protect me," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "That was his intention, yes." Her expression softened slightly. "Though I think we can all agree the execution was flawed." Maggie snorted. "Understatement of the century." Director Harmon turned her attention to my sister. "Ms. Lawson, this isn't how we prefer to make acquaintances, but thank you for supporting your sister during this challenging time." "Supporting her?" Maggie's lawyer voice emerged despite her exhaustion. "I was nearly killed because no one bothered to tell either of us what Daniel was involved in, so spare me the diplomatic niceties and tell us what happens now." I suppressed a smile despite everything. Maggie in advocacy mode was a force of nature, even when facing a woman who likely commanded significant government resources. "Fair enough." Harmon nodded, seeming to respect Maggie's directness. "We're arranging secure transport to a safe house where you'll both receive comprehensive briefing and protection until Volkov is neutralized." "Neutralized," I echoed. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning no longer a threat, either through legal channels or more direct intervention." The clinical way she discussed potentially killing someone sent a chill through me. This world Daniel had been part of operated by different rules than the one I'd thought we shared. "And how long will that take?" Maggie pressed. "Difficult to predict. Days, possibly weeks." "Weeks?" Maggie straightened. I have court appearances scheduled, clients depending on me. I can't just vanish for weeks. You can't appear in court if you're dead? Marcus pointed out bluntly, rejoining our conversation. Volkov's people nearly succeeded today. They won't fail a second time. Harmon nodded. We've already arranged professional leave for you, Ms. Lawson. Medical emergency in the family. Your firm's managing partner has been briefed, minimally, with appropriate national security constraints. The casual invasion of our lives, rearranging Maggie's work commitments without consultation, underscored how completely control had been stripped from us. Anger flared, hot and sudden. This is insane, I said, standing abruptly. You people recruit my husband, put him in danger, allow him to abandon me in a foreign country, leave me vulnerable in a compromised house for weeks, and now you're dictating our lives like we're just pieces on your operational chessboard? Harmon didn't flinch at my outburst. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Mitchell, truly, but the situation is beyond conventional solutions now. Because you let it get that way, I shot back. Yes. Her simple acknowledgement caught me off guard. We should have extracted you immediately, after Daniel's disappearance. That operational failure is on us, and we're working to rectify it now. Her admission diffused some of my anger, replacing it with weary resignation. What options did I really have? Return to normal life with Volkovs? Men hunting me? Hide somewhere on my own with limited resources? The safe house is ready for transport, Marcus announced, checking his phone. We should move. This location isn't designed for extended stays. Harmon nodded. A helicopter will take you to a private airstrip, then a plane to the safe house. Location. Marcus will accompany you and remain as your security liaison. What about communication? Maggie asked. Our mother will worry if she doesn't hear from us. Secured channels only, I'm afraid. No personal devices. Harmon's expression remained professionally sympathetic. We'll ensure your mother receives notification that you're both safe, but temporarily unreachable. The next hour passed in a blur of preparation, changing into provided clothing, surrendering our phones and personal items for security processing, receiving emergency equipment and briefings. Through it all, I felt increasingly detached, as if watching someone else's life unfold in a spy thriller. The helicopter ride was brief and silent, delivering us to a small airstrip where a sleek private jet waited. No markings, no flight attendants, just a pilot, co-pilot, and Marcus accompanying us. As we settled into luxurious leather seats, Maggie finally broke her uncharacteristic silence. I never liked him, you know. Who? I asked, though I knew. The answer. Daniel. From the beginning. She met my gaze directly. I always sensed he was hiding something. You never said anything. What was I supposed to say? Hey sis, your charming, brilliant husband gives me weird vibes? She shook her head. You were happy. That mattered more than my intuition. Her confession stung, raising uncomfortable questions. Had there been signs I'd missed? Clues that others had seen while I remained blissfully oblivious to my husband's double life? The plane taxied and took off smoothly, banking toward an unknown destination. Marcus remained near the cockpit, giving us privacy while maintaining vigilance. Where are they taking us? I asked when he finally returned to the cabin. Better if I don't say specifically. Mid-Atlantic region, rural property, self-sufficient, defensible. Another government black site? Maggie's tone dripped skepticism. Not exactly. It's a private residence owned through multiple shells. One of our safe locations for high-value assets. The description bothered me more than it should have. Is that what we are now? Assets? Protective assets, he clarified. People worth protecting. The subtle distinction offered little comfort as I watched anonymous landscape pass beneath us. My life had completely derailed in the span of 2 days, propelled by decisions Daniel had made years ago without my knowledge or consent. The flight lasted just under 2 hours before we began descent toward what appeared to be an expansive, rural property. A large main house surrounded by outbuildings, perimeter fencing just visible in the fading afternoon light, and heavily wooded areas providing natural screening. "Welcome to Blackwood," Marcus said as we touched down on a private landing strip. "Home for the foreseeable future." The property looked like a wealthy person's country retreat. Elegant without being ostentatious, secluded without seeming isolated. As we deplaned, I noticed subtle security measures, cameras disguised as landscape lighting, motion sensors integrated into decorative elements, staff members who moved with the alertness of trained personnel despite their casual attire. The sigh. "Owner is a former intelligence operative," Marcus explained as we were escorted inside. "Retired officially, but still connected. The property has all the security advantages of a government facility with none of the bureaucratic limitations." The interior continued the impression of tasteful luxury. Open spaces, quality furnishings, design elements that managed to be both beautiful and practical. Nothing like the sterile safe house I'd imagined. "You'll each have private suites," our escort explained, a woman who had introduced herself simply as Tessa. "Fully equipped, including secure tablets for communication and entertainment. The main house has a library, gym, indoor pool, and theater. Grounds include walking paths and gardens within the secure perimeter. A gilded cage is still a cage," Maggie muttered, though even she seemed somewhat impressed by our surroundings. After being shown to our respective suites, adjacent rooms connected by a shared sitting area, we were given time to settle in before dinner. The accommodations were undeniably comfortable. King beds with high-end linens, bathrooms with rainfall showers and soaking tubs, sitting areas with views of the manicured grounds. I stood at the window, watching security personnel patrol the perimeter at regular intervals. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the immaculate landscape. Less than 48 hours ago, I'd been sitting on the veranda of Daniel's dream house, ignorant of the danger surrounding me. Now I was essentially in protective custody, my entire life on indefinite hold. Dinner was served in a private dining room, a surprisingly excellent meal prepared by what appeared to be a professional chef. Marcus joined us, as did the property's security lead, a former military officer named Garrison. The conversation remained superficial, focusing on the property's amenities and security protocols rather than our situation. Only after the meal, when we moved to a comfortable sitting room for coffee, did Marcus finally address the questions hanging over us. "Tomorrow morning, Director Harmon will video conference to provide a comprehensive briefing," he began, "but I thought you might appreciate some context tonight." "That would be nice," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Maybe start with why we're sitting in a luxury bunker while my husband is God knows where." Marcus nodded, accepting my anger as justified. "Daniel's assignment with Volkov began 3 years ago, intelligence gathering only, as I mentioned earlier. Volkov's interest in architectural artifacts made Daniel an ideal candidate to get close to him." "The house," I interjected. "When did that factor in?" "About 18 months ago. Volkov expressed interest in expanding his U.S. operations in your region. Daniel saw an opportunity to position himself more centrally in Volkov's plans by establishing a presence there." "So our dream home was just part of his cover," I said flatly. "Another lie." "Not entirely," Marcus countered. "The location was strategic, yes, but Daniel genuinely wanted that property. He'd identified it years earlier, before Volkov was even on our radar." "Convenient coincidence," Maggie noted skeptically. "Intelligence work often involves recognizing and leveraging such intersections," Garrison commented. "Personal passion aligned with operational advantage." I considered this, trying to reconcile the Daniel I knew, the man who had spent hours showing me architectural sketches for our someday home, with this calculating operative who saw personal dreams as operational opportunities. "Things changed about 4 months ago," Marcus continued, Daniel discovered Volkov was using legitimate art and artifact acquisitions as cover for moving items looted from conflict zones, particularly Syria, Ukraine, and parts of North Africa. The authentication he mentioned in his video, I recalled. Exactly. Volkov asked Daniel to authenticate several items that turned out to be stolen cultural heritage pieces. He wanted Daniel's academic reputation to legitimize their provenance. And Daniel refused, I guessed. Not immediately, Marcus said, surprising me. He continued playing along while gathering evidence of Volkov's trafficking network. That's when things became more dangerous. Because he found evidence that implicated Volkov directly, Maggie surmised, legal mind clearly tracking the implications. Yes, financial records, communication logs, documentation of transactions, enough to trigger international sanctions and criminal charges. Marcus leaned forward. Daniel managed to secure this evidence during a visit to Volkov's villa in Montenegro. That's when he discovered something else as well. What? I prompted when he paused. That Volkov had been monitoring him, and by extension you, for months. The house you were building had been compromised from the beginning, with Volkov's people infiltrating the construction process to install surveillance. The violation made me physically ill. Our home, the place we had poured our hopes and resources into, had been a monitoring station all along. Every intimate moment, every private conversation, potentially observed by strangers with malicious intent. Daniel was devastated when he discovered this, Marcus added, seeming to read my thoughts. It's what ultimately pushed him to take independent action in Florence. By abandoning me, I said flatly. By attempting to draw Volkov's attention away from you, he corrected gently. The plan was for you to receive the package with the safe deposit box key immediately upon your return. You would access the box, learn the truth, and we would extract you to safety before Volkov's people could react. But the package was delayed, I recalled. Intercepted, actually. One of Volkov's operatives within the Postal Service identified it as coming from Daniel's known alias. We had to reroute through alternative channels, which took time. All these machinations, these layers of deception and counter-deception, seemed exhaustingly complex compared to the life I thought I'd been living. Why didn't Daniel just tell me the truth from the beginning? The question that had been haunting me finally emerged. If he'd just explained his involvement, I could have been prepared. Marcus exchanged glances with Garrison before answering. Daniel believed keeping you uninformed was protecting you. If you didn't know anything, you couldn't inadvertently reveal anything. That was his justification, Garrison added. But in my experience, it's often more complicated than that. Compartmentalization becomes a habit in this line of work. The longer you maintain separate identities, the harder it becomes to integrate them. His insight resonated uncomfortably. Had Daniel kept me in the dark not just for my protection, but because it was easier than reconciling the two versions of himself? So what now? Maggie asked, practical as always. We hide here while you hunt for Volkov and Daniel plays cat and mouse somewhere overseas. Essentially, yes, Marcus confirmed. Though we're not just hiding, we're preparing. Director, Harmon wants to discuss options that might resolve this situation more proactively. Meaning? Meaning Volkov believes you have something he wants, Marcus said, looking directly at me. That creates both danger and opportunity. The implication hung in the air for a moment before I understood. You want to use me as bait. Not exactly, Marcus hedged, though his expression confirmed my suspicion. But your perceived knowledge is a potential leverage point. Absolutely not, Maggie interjected forcefully. You people have done enough damage already. You're not putting my sister at additional risk to clean up your operational mess. The decision would be entirely Nora's, Garrison assured her. And any involvement would be under the strictest security protocols. I'll consider all options, I said before Maggie could object further. But first, I want to know everything. about Daniel's work, about Volkov, about what exactly is at stake. No more selective information or need-to-know limitations. Marcus nodded. That's precisely what tomorrow's briefing will provide. Later that night, alone in my luxurious prison suite, I stood again at the window watching moonlight cast shadows across the property. The events of the past 2 days had transformed not just my circumstances, but my understanding of the past 3 years of my life. Had any of it been real? Daniel's passion for our future, his enthusiasm for the house, his explanations for frequent travel, how much had been genuine, and how much calculated performance? My secure tablet chimed with an incoming message, startling me from my thoughts. The notification showed it was from Director Harmon, a video file attachment with a simple message. I thought you might want to see this before tomorrow's briefing. I opened the file to find footage date-stamped 6 weeks ago, just days after Daniel's disappearance. It showed him in what appeared to be a European cafe, thinner than I remembered, with subtle changes to his appearance. Darker hair, glasses, different style of clothing. He was speaking directly to the camera in a low voice. I need confirmation that Nora's been secured. The package should have reached her by now, and your team should have her in protective custody. Please, Claire, I need to know she's safe. The desperation in his voice, the genuine fear in his eyes, this wasn't performance. This was the Daniel I knew, truly concerned for my welfare. Another voice off camera, presumably Director Harmon, responded, We're handling it, Daniel, but you need to come in. This independent operation isn't sustainable. Not until I know Volkov's focus is completely on me and away from her, Daniel insisted. I've left enough breadcrumbs for his people to follow. Just keep her safe until this is over. The footage ended abruptly, leaving me staring at a black screen, tears streaming down my face. Whatever else Daniel had done, whatever deceptions he had deemed necessary, his concern for me had been genuine, but the footage raised as many questions as it answered. It was recorded 6 weeks ago, with Daniel clearly believing I was already under protection. Yet I'd spent those 6 weeks living unguarded in the very house he knew was compromised. Had the agency simply failed to act on his request? Or had something else gone wrong? I set the tablet aside, emotions churning too intensely for sleep. Tomorrow would bring more answers, but I already knew one thing with certainty. Whatever game was being played between Daniel, Volkov, and the intelligence agency, I was done being a passive pawn. If they wanted my involvement, it would be on IAMD. My terms, and those terms would include finding my husband, whether to save him or confront him remained to be seen. The morning briefing with Director Harmon was comprehensive to the point of overwhelming. Seated in a secure conference room within the Blackwood property, Maggie and I watched as classified documents, surveillance footage, and intelligence reports painted a picture of Alexei Volkov that was far more complex than I'd imagined. Volkov began as a mid-level energy executive during the post-Soviet privatization, Harmon explained via secure video link. He leveraged political connections to acquire assets others couldn't access, building an empire that now spans energy, technology, and finance. The screen displayed photographs of Volkov at various political and social events, shaking hands with world leaders, attending gallery openings, hosting charity galas. The perfect picture of legitimacy. His public persona is carefully crafted, Harmon continued. Philanthropist, art collector, patron of cultural preservation. The irony being that he's responsible for some of the most systematic looting of cultural heritage sites in conflict zones. Images shifted to show damaged archaeological sites, artifacts in transit, documentation of black market sales. The operation was sophisticated, with legitimate acquisitions providing cover for the movement of illegally obtained treasures. Daniel's academic expertise made him invaluable in this domain, Marcus added from his position near the door. Volkov trusted his authentication, because Daniel's reputation in the field was spotless. Until it wasn't, I noted, thinking of Daniel's video message. Until Daniel realized what he was actually authenticating. Precisely, Harmon nodded. Daniel was initially unaware that certain items in Volkov's collection had questionable provenance. When he discovered the truth, he approached us with concerns. "And you recruited him," Maggie said, her tone making it sound like an accusation. "He volunteered," Harmon corrected. Daniel was genuinely disturbed by the looting operations. These weren't just valuable objects to him. They represented cultural heritage that belonged to future generations. That sounded like the Daniel E. knew, passionate about preservation, often ranting about the ethical responsibilities of historians and archaeologists. Yet it still didn't explain the elaborate deception he'd maintained with me. "So you had Daniel gather evidence," I prompted, redirecting the conversation. "Which he did in Montenegro." "Yes. During a weekend gathering of Volkov's inner circle, Daniel accessed financial records, communications, and documentation that provided a comprehensive map of the trafficking network." Harmon's expression turned grave. What he didn't know was that Volkov had become suspicious weeks earlier and had him under surveillance. "Including our house," I added. "Unfortunately, yes. The property you purchased had previously been of interest to Volkov's organization for its strategic location. When Daniel became interested in it, Volkov's people saw an opportunity. The coincidence seemed too convenient. How did they even know Daniel was looking at that property?" Marcus and Harmon exchanged glances before she answered. "Because Daniel made it known in their circles. It was part of establishing his cover, a professor making an ambitious property investment beyond his apparent means. Using our actual dream home as bait," I said bitterly. "I understand your anger," Harmon acknowledged. "For what it's worth, Daniel believed the house would be secured before you took residence. The surveillance was discovered during his final intelligence-gathering operation. The timeline clarified in my mind. That's why he insisted on our anniversary trip when the renovations weren't complete. He knew the house was compromised." "Yes. The plan was for him to document the surveillance equipment after supposedly securing the evidence Volkov wanted most, a ledger of high-value artifacts with their true provenance and black market values." "Which doesn't actually exist," Maggie inferred, correct? Daniel created the fiction of this ledger to justify his actions when he disappeared. The real evidence is considerably more comprehensive. Digital files that have already been secured by our agency. The briefing continued, detailing Volkov's resources, known associates, and the current efforts to track and contain his operations. Throughout, I found myself increasingly troubled by the disparity between the operational timeline Harmon presented and the reality of my experience. "You knew the house was compromised 6 weeks ago?" I said during a pause in the presentation. "Daniel's video message to you made it clear he expected me to be extracted immediately after he disappeared. Why wasn't I?" Harmon's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "There was an operational failure. The communication channel Daniel used to report the surveillance was compromised. By the time we received his intelligence, he had already implemented his independent plan in Florence." 6 weeks, I repeated. "It took 6 weeks for you to realize I was living in a surveillance hub for an international criminal?" "The situation was complicated by jurisdictional issues and verification protocols," Harmon offered, though her explanation sounded hollow even to my untrained ears. "Bureaucracy," Maggie translated flatly. "Your red tape nearly got my sister killed." Harmon didn't deny it. The breakdown in communication was unacceptable. Which is why we're now throwing our full resources behind resolving this situation. The briefing concluded with a detailed security assessment and overview of our current status. Volkov's operatives were being tracked, international law enforcement was preparing coordinated actions against his network, and efforts to locate Daniel continued. "Which brings us to the matter of your potential involvement," Harmon said. addressing me directly. Volkov believes you have access to information that could expose or incriminate him. That belief creates an opportunity. You want to use me to draw him out, I said, confirming my suspicion from the previous evening. We want to leverage his perception, Harmon corrected carefully. A controlled communication suggesting you're willing to exchange information for security could provide critical advantages. Absolutely not, Maggie interjected forcefully. You're talking about making my sister an even more visible target. With comprehensive protection and strictly controlled parameters, Marcus assured her. Nora would never be in actual physical danger. Like she wasn't in danger living in that house for 6 weeks? Maggie countered. As they argued logistics and risk assessments, I found myself detaching from the conversation, my mind circling back to Daniel's video message from 6 weeks ago. The genuine fear in his eyes, the desperate need to know I was safe. Whatever else had happened, whatever lies he had told, that concern had been real. I want to help find Daniel, I said abruptly, interrupting the ongoing debate. Not just as bait for Volkov, but actively participating in locating my husband. Harmon's surprise was evident even through the video link. Mrs. Mitchell, I appreciate your willingness, but the search for Daniel involves highly trained personnel with specialized skills. I know my husband, I cut her off. I know his patterns, his references, his way of thinking, even accepting that he kept secrets from me. There are aspects of Daniel that only I would recognize. Marcus studied me thoughtfully. She has a point. Daniel's operational methods are unorthodox precisely because they draw on his academic background and personal experiences. Nora might see connections our analysts would miss. After considerable discussion and Maggie's reluctant acknowledgement that I was stubborn enough to do it anyway, a compromise was reached. I would assist the intelligence team analyzing Daniel's movements and communications, while also participating in a carefully orchestrated communication strategy to manipulate Volkov's expectations. The next 3 days passed in a blur of intensive work. Mornings were spent with analysts reviewing Daniel's known locations since Florence. Afternoon sessions focused on crafting communications to Volkov through intermediaries, and evenings were dedicated to security briefings and contingency planning. Throughout, I immersed myself in the evidence of Daniel's other life: field reports, communications with handlers, operational assessments. The man described in these materials was both familiar and foreign. Daniel's intellect and attention to detail clearly recognizable, but applied to objectives and circumstances I could never have imagined. On the 4th morning, during a review of Daniel's last known movements, something caught my attention in the surveillance footage from a train station in Geneva. "Stop there," I said, pointing to a figure barely visible at the edge of the frame. "Can you enhance that section? The technician complied, zooming in on what appeared to be Daniel in his current disguise. Darker hair, glasses, different posture, waiting on a platform. Nothing seemed immediately significant about the image. "What are you seeing?" Marcus asked. "The book he's holding," I said, leaning closer. "It's Calvino's Invisible Cities." "Significance?" the analyst prompted. "It was the first gift he ever gave me, before we were even dating. He quoted from it when he proposed." I studied the image more carefully. He's holding it deliberately, making sure it's visible. It's a message. Marcus directed the analyst to check all references to the book in Daniel's communications and records. Within an hour, we had a pattern. Subtle references to specific cities from Calvino's work appearing in Daniel's messages and movements over the past 6 weeks. He's created a communication system using the book as a cipher, I realized. Each city he references corresponds to a location or action. Working with cryptographers and literary analysts, we began mapping the pattern. Daniel had been leaving breadcrumbs not just for Volkov to follow, but for me, if I knew to look for them. By evening, we had decoded enough to identify a pattern, pointing toward a specific location. a small coastal town in Portugal where we had spent a weekend during an academic conference years earlier. A place with personal significance known only to us. He's setting up a meeting, I told Harmon during our evening briefing. The pattern suggests he'll be at this location 3 days from now. It could be misdirection, Harmon cautioned. Designed to lure Volkov's people into a trap. It's not, I said with certainty. This message wasn't meant for them to decode. It's for me. After extensive debate, a plan formed. A team would secure the location in advance, while I, accompanied by Marcus and tactical support, would make the rendezvous. Simultaneously, the communication strategy with Volkov would continue, suggesting I was willing to negotiate from a different location entirely. It's a significant risk, Harmon warned. If you're wrong about this message, I'm not, I insisted. I know my husband. Whatever else Daniel has hidden from me, this message was meant for me to find. 2 days later, I found myself on a private jet heading to Portugal, anxiety and anticipation churning within me. The plan was comprehensive. Surveillance already in place at the destination, tactical teams positioned, communication channels secured. Yet beneath the operational details lay the personal reality I was finally confronting. I was going to see my husband again after nearly 2 months of believing he had abandoned me. What would I say to him? What could possibly address the magnitude of deception between us? The questions circled relentlessly during the flight, offering no resolution. The coastal town was exactly as I remembered it. Whitewashed buildings cascading down cliffs toward a turquoise sea, narrow streets winding between cafes and shops catering to the modest tourist trade. The hotel where Daniel and I had stayed years ago remained unchanged, its terrace overlooking the harbor where fishing boats bobbed alongside. Small pleasure craft. According to our decoded message, Daniel would appear at a specific cafe near the harbor at sunset. Our team secured the area hours in advance, clearing adjacent buildings, positioning observers, establishing a perimeter that would allow the meeting while maintaining security. "You'll wear this," Marcus said, handing me an elegant pendant necklace. "Microphone and tracking device. We'll monitor every word, and tactical support is exactly 4 seconds away if needed." I nodded, too tense for words as the appointed hour approached. Dressed casually in linen pants and a light sweater, clothing that could belong to any tourist, I took a seat at an outdoor table with a clear view of both the harbor and the street approaches. Marcus positioned himself 2 tables away, appearing to read a newspaper while maintaining constant awareness of our surroundings. Other team members blended into the setting, a couple taking photos of the sunset, a waiter serving nearby tables, a fisherman working on nets by the harbor wall. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks. I ordered a coffee, trying to control the trembling in my hands as minutes ticked by with no sign of Daniel. Had I misinterpreted the message? Was this entire operation based on wishful thinking rather than actual evidence? As doubt began to overwhelm me, a figure appeared at the corner of the street leading to the harbor. A man walking with unhurried purpose, his attention seemingly on the sunset, but his path bringing him steadily closer to the cafe. Even with the changes to his appearance, I recognized Daniel immediately. Something in his walk, in the set of his shoulders, in the way he carried himself, remained essentially him despite all efforts at disguise. Our eyes met across the plaza, a moment of electric recognition that no surveillance could capture. He hesitated briefly, then continued toward me, taking the seat across from mine as if this were any normal meeting between husband and wife. "Nora," he said simply, his voice sending a shock through me after so many weeks of absence. "You decoded the message." "I had help," I replied, gesturing subtly toward Marcus. "Your former colleagues have been very informative." Daniel glanced briefly at Marcus, a flash of recognition crossing his features. "I see. Then you know everything?" "Enough," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Enough to understand What you've been involved in, if not why you kept me in the dark. He reached across the table as if to take my hand, then stopped himself, uncertainty replacing his initial composure. I thought I was protecting you. I convinced myself that separation between my work and our life together was keeping you safe. How did that work out? I asked, unable to keep bitterness from my tone. Living in a house wired with surveillance, being hunted by Volkov's men, fleeing for my life through the woods? Was that your version of protection? Pain flashed across his face. The package was supposed to reach you immediately. You were supposed to be extracted before you ever returned to the house. When I realized that hadn't happened, he broke off, composing himself. I've been trying to draw Volkov away, to make myself the more valuable target. By disappearing without explanation, leaving your wedding ring behind like our marriage meant nothing? I left the ring as a signal, he said quietly, to let you know it wasn't what it appeared. I couldn't risk direct communication once I discovered how compromised our lives had become. The cafe around us continued its normal evening rhythm, servers, moving between tables, tourists enjoying the sunset, music drifting from nearby restaurants, yet between us sat years of deception and weeks of abandonment, creating a gulf wider than the physical table separating us. Volkov's network has been compromised, I said, shifting to the operational matters we needed to address. Your evidence is being used to dismantle his trafficking operation. Director Harmon believes they'll have enough for international warrants within days. Daniel nodded, clearly processing the implications. That's good, but Volkov himself won't be easily contained by legal mechanisms. He has resources, connections, contingency plans. Which is why you're still in the field, I surmised. Tracking his movements, monitoring his reactions. Yes, he believes I have physical evidence that hasn't been secured by authorities yet, the ledger I fabricated. As long as he's focused on finding me and that non-existent document, he's predictable. I studied my husband's face, thinner than before, with new lines of strain around his eyes and mouth. Whatever game he had been playing these past weeks had clearly taken a toll. The agency wants me to help them set a trap, I told him, using me as bait, essentially, making Volkov believe I have access to the information he wants. Daniel's reaction was immediate and visceral. Absolutely not. That's exactly what I've been trying to prevent. Volkov is ruthless, Nora. He won't hesitate to use extreme measures to get what he wants. I'm already involved, I pointed out. The moment you decided our house should be part of your cover, the moment you left me vulnerable while you played hero, I became involved without consent or preparation. He flinched at the accuracy of my assessment. I made mistakes, terrible ones. I thought I could keep these worlds separate, that my work could remain contained without touching our real life. This is our real life, Daniel. Right, here, right now. There is no separation anymore. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of truth settling between us. Around us, the tactical team maintained their surveillance, ready to intervene at the slightest indication of threat. What happens now? I finally asked. Do you disappear again? Continue this shadow life while I wait for what? Resolution? Redemption? Divorce papers? Daniel's expression crumpled at the last suggestion. Is that what you want? What I want, I said carefully, is the truth. Not just about Volkov or your work, but about us. Was any of it real? The man who quoted poetry and cried over first editions and spent hours sketching our dream house, was he real? Or just another convenient cover? He was real, Daniel said without hesitation. Everything I felt, everything I feel for you, is real. The work, the deception, the compartmentalization, that was wrong. I see that now. But my love for you was never part of the cover. I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, the lies, the abandonment, the danger he had exposed me to, I wanted to believe that the core of our relationship had been genuine. Before I could respond, Marcus made a subtle hand signal from his table. Something had changed in our security situation. "We need to move," Daniel said, immediately alert to the shift. "Someone's watching who shouldn't be." I glanced around, seeing nothing obviously concerning among the cafe patrons or pedestrians. "How can you tell?" "The fisherman by the harbor wall has been joined by someone who isn't part of our team." Daniel stood casually, as if merely shifting to get a better view of the sunset. "We need to leave. Now." Marcus approached our table, maintaining the appearance of a friendly encounter while communicating urgency. Two of Volkov's known associates just entered the plaza from the north side. "We have extraction ready at the secondary location." We moved smoothly from the cafe, Daniel's hand at the small of my back, guiding me through the evening crowds with practiced ease. No running, no obvious alarm, just 3 tourists making their way from one evening venue to another. "The church at the top of the hill," Marcus murmured. "Transport waiting in the rear courtyard." As we climbed the narrow street leading upward, I risked a glance back. 2 men had indeed detached from the harbor area and were following at a measured distance. "They're not making a move," I observed. "They won't," Daniel replied. "Not in public. They're tracking us to a more isolated location." "Which we're not going to provide," Marcus added, guiding us through a narrow passageway between buildings that shortened our route to the church. We reached the ancient stone structure without incident, passing through its quiet interior where evening prayers had just concluded. The rear courtyard contained a single van with darkened windows, engine already running. As we approached the vehicle, the side door slid open to reveal Director Harmon herself, accompanied by 2 tactical team members. "Circumstances changed," she explained as we climbed aboard. "Volkov is making moves we didn't anticipate. I needed to be on site." The van pulled away from the church, taking a winding route through the town's narrow streets before emerging onto a coastal road heading north. "What's happening?" Daniel asked, his arm still protectively around my shoulders. "Volkov's assets are being frozen across multiple jurisdictions," Harmon explained. "Based on the evidence you gathered, international warrants have been issued. He's running out of options and resources rapidly." "Making him more dangerous, not less," Daniel noted grimly. "Precisely, which is why we need to accelerate our timeline." Harmon turned to me. "Mrs. Mitchell, I know this is far from what you envisioned for your life, but we need to make a decision about next steps." Daniel tensed beside me. "She's done enough. Get her to safety, somewhere Volkov can't reach her." "That's not your decision to make," I said firmly, shifting to face him. "Directly, not anymore. You lost the right to make unilateral choices about my safety when you decided to keep me in the dark." The van continued its journey along the coastal road as we debated options. Harmon presented a modified plan, using controlled information through secured channels to suggest I was willing to exchange Volkov's ledger for guaranteed safety. The communication would direct him to a location where a multinational task force would be waiting. "It minimizes your direct involvement," Harmon explained, "while still leveraging his perception that you have access to damaging information." "And if he doesn't take the bait?" I asked. "Then we continue dismantling his network piece by piece until he has nowhere left to run." Harmon's expression was resolute, but a direct operation would save considerable time and resources. Daniel's objections were immediate and emphatic, but I found myself considering the proposal with unexpected clarity. After weeks of having decisions made for me, by Daniel, by circumstances, by shadowy organizations, the opportunity to actively participate in a resolution appealed to my need for agency. "I'll do it," I said, interrupting Daniel's ongoing argument with Harmon. "But I have conditions." Both turned to me with surprise. "First, Maggie remains completely removed from any operational aspects. She goes home with full security until this is finished." I held Harmon's gaze steadily. "Second, Daniel and I are not separated again during the operation. Whatever happens, we face it together. Daniel's expression softened with something like hope. And third, I continued, when this is over, assuming we survive, Daniel and I get a clean start. New identities if necessary, but a genuine chance to rebuild without agencies or obligations hanging over us. Harmon considered my terms briefly before nodding. Acceptable, with operational parameters to ensure security. Your sister's already been requesting to return to her practice anyway. The plan came together as we traveled to a secure location, a renovated monastery on the Portuguese coast that now served as an intelligence outpost. Over the next 48 hours, communication channels were established, digital breadcrumbs placed, and an elaborate trap constructed. Throughout preparations, Daniel remained close, not quite forgiven, but no longer entirely separate either. We spoke during quiet moments between operational briefings, beginning the painful process of reconciliation. I never meant to build our life on lies, he told me during a rare moment alone, standing on the monastery's ancient walls overlooking the Atlantic. It started as occasional consulting, using my academic credentials to gain access to certain collections, certain people. Then it became more. Why not tell me when it changed? When it became dangerous? He sighed, the weariness of years of deception evident in his posture. Because I was afraid of losing you. Afraid you'd see me differently. Not as the man you married, but as someone capable of deception and manipulation. Instead, I discovered it in the worst possible way. Yes. His honesty was a small comfort. I convinced myself the separation between those worlds was protecting you. But really, I was protecting myself from having to integrate those parts of my life, from having to be fully known. There was truth in his self-assessment, a recognition of the fear that had driven his choices. Not malice or indifference, but fear of rejection and judgment. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, I admitted, the pain of this acknowledgement sharp between us. But I want to try. When this is finished, if we survive, I want to try. It was the most I could offer, honestly, not forgiveness yet, but willingness to begin the long journey toward it. The operation unfolded with precision the following day. Controlled communications suggested I was willing to exchange information at a specific location. A private art gallery in Lisbon, known to be a favored venue of Volkov's legitimate business associates. The gallery was closed for a private event, providing the perfect cover for our operation while allowing law enforcement to secure the surrounding area. I arrived with Daniel, both of us dressed for an upscale gallery opening. Tactical teams positioned themselves throughout the building and surrounding streets, while intelligence analysts monitored all electronic communications in the area. The trap was as secure as modern surveillance and tactical planning could make it. Volkov arrived precisely on schedule, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to power. 2 security personnel accompanied him, their watchful assessment of the gallery's interior making it clear they were more than standard bodyguards. "Mrs. Mitchell," he greeted me in accented English, his smile not reaching his cold eyes. "A pleasure to finally meet you. Your husband has spoken highly of your intelligence." "Mr. Volkov," I acknowledged, maintaining outward composure despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "You claim to have something of interest to me," he replied, dispensing with pleasantries. "Something your husband entrusted to you before his departure." Daniel stood beside me, his posture deliberately submissive, a man caught in circumstances beyond his control rather than an active threat. The role we had crafted for him in this scenario. "I believe you know what I possess," I said carefully, following the script we had developed. "Documentation that would be problematic if it reached certain authorities, Volkov's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes sharpened. "And what do you propose in exchange for this documentation?" "Safety, Security. For both of us. I gestured to Daniel. We simply want to live our lives without looking over our shoulders. A modest request, Volkov observed, though his tone suggested skepticism. May I see what I'm purchasing with this guarantee? This was the critical moment in our operation, the point where we needed to maintain Volkov's engagement while the final positions were secured around the gallery. Of course, I replied, opening a portfolio I'd been carrying. These are sample pages. The complete documentation is secured elsewhere to be released upon confirmation of our agreement. The portfolio contained carefully crafted documents, convincing, but ultimately useless without the digital evidence already in law enforcement's possession. Volkov examined them carefully, his security personnel maintaining vigilant watch of the gallery space. These appear authentic, he acknowledged after a moment, though hardly comprehensive. They're representative. Daniel spoke for the first time. The complete ledger includes transactions dating back 5 years, with links to your banking network in Cyprus and Montenegro. Volkov's attention shifted to Daniel, something dangerous flickering in his expression. You've caused me considerable inconvenience, Professor Mitchell. Assets frozen, associates arrested, operations disrupted. An unfortunate necessity after discovering my wife was under surveillance, Daniel replied evenly. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. The tension between them was palpable, predator and prey momentarily facing each other directly. In my ear, the tiny communication device we'd been provided indicated that final positions were secured. The operation was ready to conclude. I believe we can come to an arrangement, Volkov said finally, returning his attention to me. Though, I'll need to verify the complete documentation before providing the guarantees you seek. Of course, I agreed. I've arranged for the complete files to be delivered here shortly. A colleague is bringing them from their secure location. This was the signal our teams were waiting for. Within seconds, the gallery's doors opened to admit not the fictional colleague with documents, but tactical teams moving with coordinated precision. Alexei Volkov, announced the lead officer. You're under arrest on charges of trafficking in stolen cultural artifacts, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. Volkov's security personnel reached for weapons but froze when they realized the overwhelming force surrounding them. Volkov himself remained eerily composed, his gaze locked on me with chilling intensity. Impressive performance, Mrs. Mitchell, he said quietly as officers approached to take him into custody. Though I wonder if you understand the game you've chosen to play. Some opponents don't concede even when the board appears lost. His words sent a chill through me despite our apparent success. As he was led away, I found myself gripping Daniel's hand with unexpected force, the finality of the moment washing over me. It's over, Daniel murmured, though uncertainty lingered in his tone. He can't reach us now. I wanted to believe him, but Volkov's parting words echoed in my mind. Some opponents don't concede even when the board appears lost. The aftermath of the operation unfolded with surprising swiftness. Volkov's arrest triggered coordinated actions across multiple countries, dismantling what remained of his network. Assets were seized, associates arrested, evidence secured. Within days, the threat that had dominated our lives began to dissipate, like morning fog under strong sunlight. Director Harmon kept her promises. Maggie returned to her law practice with enhanced security protocols and regular check-ins from intelligence personnel. Daniel and I were provided options for our future, including new identities and relocation if we chose, or enhanced security if we preferred to maintain some connection to our previous lives. The dream house is still legally yours, Harmon informed us during our final debriefing. Though, obviously, the surveillance equipment has been removed. You could return there, with appropriate security measures in place. Daniel and I exchanged glances, communication passing between us without words. I think we need a fresh start, I said finally. Somewhere without those associations. Somewhere we can build something genuine, Daniel added, without deception or hidden agendas. We chose a coastal community in another country, similar in some ways to the Portuguese town where we had reconnected, but without the operational history that might connect us to past events. New names, new backstories, new opportunities to build a life based on truth rather than convenience or necessity. The transition wasn't seamless. There were moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge. Daniel's instinct to compartmentalize, my hesitation to trust fully. We addressed them directly, sometimes painfully, always honestly. Therapy helped, both individually and together, providing frameworks for rebuilding what had been damaged. 6 months after Volkov's arrest, we stood on the deck of our new home overlooking the sea, the evening air carrying the scent of salt and distant cooking fires. Not a dream house created as operational cover, but a modest place we had chosen together with clear eyes and shared purpose. "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked, the question that still emerged occasionally during quiet moments. "Staying with me after everything?" I considered his question carefully, as I always did. I regret the deception, the lost time, the foundation we had to rebuild. But no, I don't regret choosing to try again. He nodded, accepting my honesty as the gift it was intended to be. "I think about the house sometimes," he admitted. "The one I convinced you was our dream home." "It was beautiful," I acknowledged. "But it was never really ours, was it? It belonged to the people we were pretending to be. And this?" He gestured to our surroundings, simpler, smaller, but entirely our own. "This belongs to who we actually are," I said. "The people we're choosing to become together. We weren't naive enough to believe the past couldn't reach us here." Volkov's network had been dismantled, but Harmon's team maintained discreet monitoring, alert for any indication that remnants of his organization might seek retribution. Our new identities had layers of protection, our movements periodically, reviewed for security concerns. But beneath these practical considerations lay something more fundamental, a commitment to honesty that had emerged from the rubble of deception. Daniel no longer worked in the shadows, having found a position teaching at a local university that required no hidden agendas. I had resumed translation work, building a client base in our new community. We were, in many ways, starting over, not as the people we had been, but as the people those experiences had shaped us into, more cautious perhaps, more aware of life's fragility and the consequences of choices made with partial information. The evening deepened around us, stars emerging in the darkening sky. In the distance, fishing boats returned to the harbor, their lights creating a constellation of human activity against the gathering night. "No more dream houses," Daniel said softly, his arm around my shoulders. "Just real ones, with real people inside them," I agreed, leaning into his embrace. It wasn't perfect. Nothing built on a damaged foundation ever could be entirely without cracks. But it was honest, and it was ours. Not the life I had imagined when Daniel had kissed my forehead in that Florence hotel room 43 days before everything changed, but perhaps something more valuable for having been tested and chosen rather than simply assumed. The house behind us was modest but solid, built to withstand coastal storms and changing seasons. Rather like us, I thought. Not the fairy tale we had once believed in, but something weathered and tested, with the possibility of endurance built into its very structure. And for now, in this moment, that possibility was enough.